want to talk to you about afterwards. Anyways, okay. Hello. We are here. We're back with another edition of Decline and Fall of Western Art, the book I wrote many years ago with Mr. Alexander Sangmoore, who did the audiobook version of it. And we are discussing parts of it because why not? Because you should know about it, and because it's in this audiobook, and you should listen to it, and you should take it to heart. So we've decided to do it in segments and discuss parts of it. And I wanted to discuss this time the parts relating to the chapter on, roughly speaking, Alexander has his own notes and things he wants to talk about, and we'll get to those first. I wanted to discuss the chapter on hierarchical industrialization, which is a concept I'm very fond of, although I'm not sure that I'm not the only one, that I am the only one who really finds it amazing and interesting. I wouldn't say that maybe I'm being extreme, but I've brought it up many times, and people just sort of stare at me blank-faced, like, what are you talking about? It seems like, and no one gets excited about it. Maybe it's either a concept ahead of its time or I am a fool. Regardless, I don't think I'm a fool. Maybe it's a mix of both. But Alexander has his own notes related to this. So why don't we talk about those?
Yeah, so briefly to provide a definition for the audience relating to how I see hierarchical industrialization, suffice it to say it's a means of mass production of cultural detritus and trash and force feeding it via both cultural subversion, social conditioning, and conformity pressures to the public, which is unaware that it is a deliberate reduction of standards imposed from those who wish to reduce general standards when it comes to culture, the aesthetics, the arts, and so forth.
Okay, let's just be clear, though. The actual concept of hierarchical industrialization is my response to that, which I believe would be a solution to that. The state which I understand, it seems like we are living in an oppressive top-down hierarchy, of course, but it's masked. It survives. Its survival mechanism is the concept that the average person feels they're in a state of total freedom and they're being sold and buying things through a system of commerce which is totally free, unhindered from any sort of oligarchical influence, and this illusion of mass democracy and mass consumption. Consumerism and the assembly line process of creating things, which is wasteful and terrible in every possible way, is not hierarchical. It is hierarchical underneath, but it's presented in a neutral state of equality and freedom. So, just to be clear, hierarchical industrialization is the solution I propose to the current state of things, which I consider to be just democratic consumption and mass production, where things are produced for the reason of selling to the average person.
As an aspect of the parallel economy, it would be hierarchical industrialization would be an aspect of the parallel economy that can be utilized in order to reclaim what is by design engineered to be low standards and trash. So you posit it to be a method of reclaiming the arts via the instruction and implementation of a parallel economy type system, but it being for culture and the arts, right?
Well, that's part of it. It's more like that the system of production is not based around trying to dupe and sell and make money. This is the mercantile class power idea, that you can survive like a parasite off the main populace by perpetually creating and selling them things, mostly trash, in a ongoing cycle of parasitic money making. When my proposition is that your value system should be based on, if you have industry like we do, if you have the power of technology like we do, it should be used first and foremost for heroic purpose, courageous exploration, and things like this. Its number one goal should not be consumption, selling to the masses, this kind of lower base mercantile notions at all.
Yes.
Not that you won't let me just finish. Not that you won't have some commerce, and not that you won't have some level of like giving people things and giving them industrial products and things, but it's much lower priority.
I
Sorry,
hear
that's it.
you,
No.
sir.
Okay.
So you would make the comparison between mercantile industrialization and
Yeah.
hierarchical industrialization, and you would posit that hierarchical industrialization is the variant which is for the parallel economy dash culture dash arts institutions that must crop up from the corpse of the present rotting body of works relating to art, culture, aesthetics, etc. So,
Yes.
for the sake of the audience, the two things that we are trying to understand and compare and comprehend as groundedly as possible is mercantile industrialization
Yes.
versus hierarchical industrialization. And
Yes.
hierarchical industrialization is not mercantile industrialization. It is the exact opposite, whereby the institutions relating to art, culture, aesthetics, etc., are not.
Oh, are you there? You broke up for me. Hello?
Yes, I'm here, sir. So,
Oh, okay.
just to repeat very briefly, mercantile industrialization versus hierarchical industrialization are the things that are being analyzed, compared, comprehended for the sake of the audience, and deliberated
Yes.
upon.
Yes.
You posit that the term hierarchical industrialization is the term utilized for the parallel economy systems relating to culture, art, etc., that will necessarily spring from the rotting corpse of the present mercantile industrialization.
Well,
Yes,
hopefully, yes. Hopefully,
great.
if we're not inevitably like find ourselves scurrying like rats around, rubbish tips, mountainous rubbish tips in some kind of radioactive wasteland. Yes, so ideally we will emerge from that, and it would be a system
Yes.
resembling, say,
So I
it
would.
would be a system. Let me just say, resembling something like a good example is my novel, The Dream God, or Dune, as people know better. Say a society where basically, let's say, monarchy and traditional archaic society never didn't collapse and fall to the mercantile class, but yet they had the power of technology that we have today. You would see a much grander vision of what human capabilities, I think, than just this continual pandering, selling, and a wasteful system of what do you call it? What do you call it when the world supply chain system, which is itself a kind of king now, and everything is enslaved to the actual supply chain system itself and on all the powers that work within it. So the hierarchical by hierarchical, I essentially mean a true totemic, traditional archaic system where you have basically a king at the top, more or less a theocracy of some kind. A system of kings and nobles, priests, warriors that are way above the mercantile class, and the considerations of assembly line selling of worthless products is laughably stupid, which it is. So just to be clear, it's exactly what I envision with hierarchical industrialization.
I
Pardon me if I.
see.
Yes.
General custodians of the arts is a fundamental premise of being able to to rather withhold against the storm of mercantile industrialization. So, for the time being, a monarch of the arts would be
Mm-hmm.
the end state of it, but custodians in general will have to rise first before a king custodian, in brackets, in quotation marks, of the arts would have to form. So I would say
Yes.
start with little steps and eventually go to, having a hierarchical system of gatekeeping the arts from, by design, reduction of standards. Yes.
Yes. Do you hear some music? I hear music.
Some
Is
music?
that me?
No, that might be Telegram in the background of mine, sir. I have the notification set on, or it might be your side.
Oh
So,
shit.
what I wanted to analyze is the body of works and the mindset that goes into the creation of the mercantile industrialization. Because if you study, for lack of
Sorry,
a
can you hear
better
me?
term, yes,
You
loud
can.
and clear.
I know. I'm just there is music playing from one of us, and I'm just worried since this is going on YouTube, we could get some sort of silly copyright nonsense from it. I do hear some guitar music. Can you just double
There's
check
no
your?
music on my end, sir.
Jesus Christ, where's that coming from? It's not music I'd be listening to. It sounds like music. What on earth? You can't hear it, no?
No, I can't hear it my end, sir.
Sorry, pardon me. I figured it out. Hopefully that doesn't result in some silly YouTube copyright nonsense. Yes, it was playing a song randomly for a few minutes. Maybe I can find the effort to cut that out later. So it's a bit of efforty.
No
Anyways,
worries. So what I want
like,
to
yeah,
focus on is the body of work and and the vessels for delivery of the body of work for mercantile industrialization versus the body of work for hierarchical industrialization and the vessels for delivery of it.
right.
Suffice it to say, due to the general suppression of Western art and cultural standards and the by design lowering of standards of them through mercantile industrialization, the plan and objective is to create a parallel economy of the arts, right? So we all know that the vessel for delivery of lower standards in the aesthetic realm, in culture, in arts, for mercantile industrialization is, the television, the legacy media, yada, yada. The answer and solution to this is the formation of parallel economies and vessels for art, culture, and aesthetic distribution mechanisms, right? So the act of building, right, is of paramount significance when it comes to forming the body of work for hierarchical industrialization to oppose mercantile industrialization. Makes sense, sir?
Yes, it would, and if, like it as a beginning, a starting point. Yes, eventually, what you would want to do is bring back the craft guilds, which weren't just associated with craft, but almost every aspect of a vocation in a society was managed by a guild, which had a long-standing tradition of inheritance and esotericism linked to the larger culture and tribalism, and that would be something you definitely want to bring back as part of a true economy of how things work. It still
In
exists to this
groups
day in
that
some parts.
uphold standards.
Yeah, they uphold standards and they continue an inheritance and a tradition. And there's, you begin as a journeyman or the apprentice. When you work yourself up to a guild master, then you're in charge of safeguarding. The guild. I believe Rembrandt was the guild master in the painting guild, for instance, in the Netherlands or whatever, right? As a prime example, like so, you would work up, you become a master, and you were responsible for carrying on that tradition and inheritance, and it was genealogical and sort of tribal and familial and also esoteric, religious. So that was all done
Yes,
away with, replaced by corporations, the mercantilism, nothing matters, it's all 9 to 5, just rubbish. And along with that, all the art and all the stuff we make turns to rubbish and meaningless. And so all that has to be brought back somehow, one way or the other, if you're going to have a
yes.
meaningful. I mean, it's not
The
it's not a trivial thing that your comb is a piece of plastic made in China, and then you unearth you find a comb at Hadrian's Wall, and it's the most exquisite, bone or wooden carved thing with gods and goddesses on it. It's not a small, trifling, laughing matter. And this is a problem that is not understood and not capable to be understood by really modern materialists of any kind, from communists to libertarians to just your average person. But this is really the importance of something like what I called a hierarchical industrialization. That unless some people think we must repeal and do away with industrialization altogether, which I don't think is possible. I mean, it is if we totally collapse and return to absolute dark age. But ideally, you would keep that and merely change the system, which is wasteful, polluting the earth with rubbish, just to systems like there are things where things are planned obsolescence, this awful, ridiculous concept. The only a mercantile system could come up with this rubbish. We're making clothes and things pointlessly out of plastic, filling the oceans. We got plastic in our bodies now, plastic in our brains. All this is the result of this kind of thinking. Everything is secondary to the dollar, and there's no proper hierarchy to keep things on the straight and narrow. So
when it
as
comes
it turns out,
to Go ahead.
no, I'm just saying you're right. We do need to begin with parallel systems. Yes, for sure. Like we're sort of trying to do. But eventually, yes, those systems would ideally somehow morph back into or recreate. I don't know how. Don't ask me how. I don't know how. Back into some kind of craft guild system, which would somehow supplant the current system. But I mean, we're so far away from that. We can only take the tiny baby steps. But yes, that would be the parallel economy idea that
when
you're
it
talking about,
comes
I think.
to the ethical foundations that ought fuel the understanding of hierarchical industrialization, we ought assert that it is sacred hierarchy and aristocracy of the soul, and working towards bodies of work that implement and embody aristocracy of the soul and high standards, maintenance and veneration, which is the
And
exact
heroism.
opposite.
Heroism.
And
Include always include
heroism, yes.
yeah,
Heroic
yeah,
idealism, specifically, yes.
yeah.
And we should do this while looking at its exact opposite, which is a cult and ethical system of weakness as a virtue. So the idea in modernist art, cultural and aesthetic realms, is that the underdog is supreme, and everything that is trash deserves to be elevated with flowery language to describe something that it is not. So the falsity of elevating something that is trash to be a polished turd via flowery language is the anatomy of how and the system by which they somehow sculpt that which is trash to be perceived of as something that is good and that maintains ethical and artistic standards that represent not merely their world soul, but the general zeitgeist of the time, right? So when it comes to the veneration of weakness rather than strength, we could begin with an ethical foundation of strength and aristocracy of the soul is a virtue, and the veneration of weakness is a sin, right? So
Right.
when it comes to an archetypal dash ethical foundation of where we would start with hierarchical industrialization, rising above and defeating mercantile industrialization, would be to assert that strength and aristocracy of the soul and standards maintenance is a virtue that ought to be pursued, and that weakness veneration is, for lack of a better term, a sin, right?
Yep.
The attempt to make what is weak and trash into something that is good is, as you point out in the book, little more than a exercise in gimmickry and linguistic trickery. Yes.
Yep.
So the ability for the audience to recognize linguistic trickery and turning something that should be a sin and trash into a virtue, the underlying ability of the audience to understand what is trash and what is good, right,
Yep.
is something that can and should be over time conditioned as the parallel economy of the arts, aesthetics, and culture rises, right? So while it is
Yeah.
being built, it can be guided by certain principles and ethical foundations. My one that I would posit and summarize would be strength, aristocracy of the soul, and standards are a virtue, and weakness, lower standards, and the elevation of trash into something supposedly good is a sin dash weakness, right? So if we
Yep.
start from that specific vantage point of what is good deserves to be not worshipped but appreciated, right, and noted for its standards being high, and what has low standards ought to be noted, noticed, etc., for being trash by design. Yes.
Yes. Yes. That there's. Yes. All that is absolutely correct. What I did say in the book, or what I would say, is that like there's three. Like in the book, remember I divided it into the three different prongs, the three main reasons why art today is what it is. One of them was what you're saying, which is the elevation of trash through the language of Greenberg, and the elevation of this kind of quasi intelligence, quasi um, intellectual flowery talk, which was just really just rubbishly excusing and silly word games, the buzzwordery in the games we see to this day, the playing of language to confuse and elevate things in a kind of and then turn it into kind of a class war game for the bourgeoisie, etc. There's that on its own, but that's mostly in the realms of fine art and say also architecture and places. That's where that comes into play, but it does then trickle down and feed down into everything else. But industrialization on its own was kind of its own separate other attack on art, and that was going on from the beginning with the industrial revolution, somewhat, and certainly later on, and certainly when we're in the realm of it really began as a revolution in mass production from the start, especially in England, and then later in America, and very strongly. This is where you associate like the children working in the mills and the mines and the system of commercial mass production. And again, I must give the caveat that I understand there's always going to be a certain level of this, that people are going to need things. There needs to be wholesale work, and there needs to be, to a certain extent, giant workhouse places and things like this, and maybe like to a certain extent. But I do think that that is a separate issue somewhat from the fine art problem and Greenberg, and that this was well known and understood, and even at the time in, say, the 30s and the 20s, say with Art Deco, part of Art Deco was a response to this industrialization of everyday objects and an attempt to bring back a kind of artfulness and craft to the everyday object that was being mass produced and put in people's homes, and to make sure there was a certain quality to it, that was being lost in the machine age of the assembly line. And so that was understood then, and they made a good conscious effort to combat that, and they showed it is possible, because Art Deco was overall a very good movement in that regard, and things were being mass produced with great style and great panache, and keeping in line with the culture and so forth. But that all went out the window when your values are purely commercial. Then your bottom line is always going to be, well, if I can save $1 to make this not look so fancy, I will be the winning argument in the end with these hyper American commercial values that we system that we live in. So in a sense, I just want to say that that's somewhat apart from the Greenbergian problem, although it's a trickle down. The Greenbergian stuff at the top helps excuse further the not having the need to make something artful and aesthetic.
Yes, sophistry for the gullible.
Yeah. So there's sort of two different issues. That's why I split the book up. What was the third? The third issue in the book, I think, was atheism, basically. I said it was Greenberg stuff, then it was the industrialization on its own, and then thirdly, the loss of religion generally was sort of played in. Those were the main reasons I felt, the triumvirate as to why art is the way it is today. But yeah, so that's just to clarify how I would think about
guide the lives of the citizenry. So when you have a very alive and convincing, good, high standard of mythopoetic origination and ideas that allow the citizenry to know their origins and to be proud of them, those have been done away with mercantile industrialization. And the way to oppose this overall, the most important thing, for me at least, is for bad ideas and bad standards to both be discerned by the public, by the audience, by the citizenry, and that they discriminate openly and proudly against them. So when you see modernist art that is utter trash and a humiliation ritual unto the indigenous citizenry, it ought to be known and asserted and openly hated for it being trash and of bad standards. The ability of the audience to be able to notice what is a bad idea or what is generally trash is extremely important. So the ability for the citizenry to have discernment, right, as a virtue, I genuinely consider the ability to discern what is trash and what is good to be a virtue. Should be amplified and asserted in no uncertain terms. People should not shy away from asserting this is good and this is bad. This is bad because it is trash and it is hateful, right, by design. And what is good because it is obviously so. Many people, due to general standards of conformity, either want to not put their head above the parapet or don't care enough about it and are merely bludgeoned into not caring about it because they know that it would stir a hornet's nest, right? I say that we need people to have, even if it is only privately right, even if it is not publicly asserted, this is trash, this is hateful, this is bullshit, even if it is only privately in one's own mind, it is extremely important to notice bad standards in art, culture, etc. Discernment in general of bad ideas and bad standards is a starting point when it comes to understanding mercantile industrialization versus the posited solution to it, hierarchical industrialization in a parallel economy of the arts culture and aesthetics, right?
Yeah,
That
a
is the
guild system. Yeah,
fundamental point that I got from that chapter, sir, which
yeah,
is the ability to have discernment of mercantile industrialization versus hierarchical industrialization as a potential positive solution to it. Yes?
yes. And I would say I like discernment is a good word. I preferred discrimination in the old-fashioned sense of the word, as in having discriminatory tastes and being able and willing to say this isn't good enough, not being utterly relativistic in terms of aesthetics, continually as we're told to be, and having a discerning taste in that sense. Yeah, discriminatory taste.
Yes.
But
Urbanite
I'll
ethics,
take
by
some.
the way.
What's that?
I think that in general, urbanite ethics of conformity and mental subjugation to what they perceive to be an in-group is
Mm-hmm.
the cognitive vessel for allowing standards of ideas and culture das art to be lowered, right? So we have a combination of urbanite submissiveness and a cult of weakness veneration that fuel the ability of modernist art peddlers and the mercantile industrial complex to get away with lowering standards for a buck and then selling trash uh, as if it is good with flowery language and sophistry and gimmickry. So the
Yes.
ability of the audience to notice this shit, the general mindset and ethical standards of mercantile industrialization, which is I submit to my supposed superiors in the intelligentsia and the artistic world, because if I do not, they will persecute me. So it is an ethics of subjugation, slave morality, and fear that I would summarize as urbanite slave chattel ethics, right?
Yeah.
That can be noticed, discerned, and rebuked easily, so long as someone has the cognitive, both fortitude and discernment ability to notice trash, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
if
true.
you have a body of work that is trash and the citizenry is, one, afraid to notice it, and two, doesn't have the faculties, right, to notice
Yep.
it, they don't have a point of comparison to notice that this is trash versus this is good, right? They need to be
Yep.
shown what is good and be fortified cognitively, emotionally, etc., to be able to assert this is trash, this is hateful bullshit, sophistry, gimmickry being peddled to me. And because I am not a coprophagia fetishist, an intellectual coprophagia fetishist, eater of shit, that is, I reject it. Okay.
Yep.
So we can begin with the premise of I am not a coprophagia fetishist, therefore I reject this because it is cognitive, intellectual, artistic, yada yada shit, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
this can be asserted in no uncertain terms because the fruits of their labors, mercantile industrialization's labors, are palpable, right? And as every year passes, they become more palpable, more noticeable, more discernible to the average citizen, right? The bottom line, the normie, let's say, is able to discern that their body of work is trash and shit. However, they do not have the cognitive and emotional fortitude to assert that this is indeed shit, or because they get persecuted for it. So we have what is holding back the citizenry from discernment of mercantile industrialization versus hierarchical industrialization. One is fear of persecution, and two, they do not have the cognitive and emotional faculties to discern what is good and what is not, because they live in white box NPC living standards and cognitive standards, right? When I
Yes.
said at the beginning of this diatribe, urbanite ethics, right? We're talking
Mm-hmm.
specifically about being governed and ruled by fear of persecution and lack of willingness or ability to discern good versus bad standards, because they are conditioned to believe that low standards are the norm, right? These
Right.
two factors can be addressed and dealt with and discerned and noticed, so long as people pay attention to them, right? But being able to tell people you are governed by fear, submissiveness, and you don't even have any idea or conception of what is good because you are force-fed only trash, is the starting point that I would begin with when it comes to trying to explain to these people you're being hoodwinked by sophistry and gimmickry, right? The ability
Well,
of the audience to know what is trash and to assert it is important, is my point.
yes, it's very important, but it's very hard to teach them or re-educate them or anything like that. And the entire system, the education system, the media has allowed them to flourish in thinking the way they do. This is part of the other issue for me. As you mentioned, the NPC, but like most people are NPCs, we're talking about the greater mass of the mob. They will go along with whatever the big shiny box tells them to do, the big sign on the street, or what appears on their television. Whoever has the most expensive advertising, the most something that some sign and some message they can flash in their face, the brightest and most often, will win their minds. And it doesn't matter what it is. I don't think it could be literally anything. I think at this point, I mean, you can, as far as I can see, you could put on the TV, you could tell them to go cut their dicks off, and they'll do it because they're doing it. So, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. And in that sense, let me just say, in that sense, we're dealing with. We must admit, and this was understood in archaic times. If we're talking about an archaic industrial system, not that we must be cruel towards them or anything, but that we must admit that the greater mass of the people are chattel and sort of natural serfs, and that for their own sake, you've got to really tell them what to do and get them to pick up their own bootstraps. And as you said, teach them discernment. But anything you teach them or tell them, it's a matter of being responsible. People at the top being responsible, wanting their civilization to continue, understanding most of them are going to be chattel and they need to be organized and educated to be the best they can be. Directed, yes, directed, exactly. And that was understood through all of history and is, another part of the illusion of the sort of free will American democracy system where every man's his own kingdom, which is obviously nonsense, and it's making everybody stupider by the day and making everything worse as we go. So yes, that is the key, as you say, to winning back. We can win all the arguments you like. I don't think I could lose any arguments on this subject. No one's presented one with me that I thought I lost on so far, any that tried. But let me also say this: those that do try, this is another issue. I'm not sure how serious this is, and it's more of a niche internet kind of how do I say, sort of a
sophistry exercise.
Yeah, there's a sophistry exercise on the right. From our point of view, there's actually quite a lot of people that would argue with us. Maybe not on the overall points, but on the finer points. I found these days they want to waffle on about Nietzsche and Wagner, and they don't really look at the very practical points that we would make, that say I made in the book and that you and I would discuss and are discussing here now, including industrialization and the very clear point at which the concept of art was hijacked by Greenberg, and everything from there very visibly fell apart. They skipped past all that. They want to excuse modernism to focus on futurism, which has some good points and everything, but they really want to kind of cling to a sort of early modern industrial concept of art that they figure that modernism, they can't really separate the good modernism from the bad modernism. And to them, they'll make excuses for Picasso and all the trash.
I don't get that a lot in England, by the way. In England, the general right wing is
online. I get it online in these kind of forums. If I was, quite a lot lately. I see people talking about this. They want to talk to me about it. I don't feel like they're making great points. They think they are. I don't know what it's all about exactly, but generally it's sort of a quasi excuse for the way things are. And they seem to think they're going to just skip back to a futurism and sort of redevelop from there. I don't think they go deep enough, or they don't seem to fully grasp everything we're saying from the points, including industrialization. They don't seem to they just think of fine arts, and they want to believe still that it wasn't so easily and handily dropped and utterly discarded as it was, and that there was really some merit to the likes of, maybe not Jackson Pollock is a stretch. Almost everybody hates him, I think. But it's like some of the more obvious modernists. Picasso, I hear a lot of excusing for that. Oh, but they're so original and this kind of talk. But
I have a question.
Yes. Oh, you've broken up. Hello. Hello. I can't hear you.
When it
comes
to this specific joke, so have you accused them that they are tolerating destructive trash?
How do I put
it? That end the discussion and deliberation about the topic there?
No, because then they go on about how they think Kandinsky was painting music or something. Like they really have swallowed the Greenbergian they like that poetic talk. They think jazz. I remember having an argument with one of them about jazz, how it was mostly bad in my opinion. I do like some sort of rocky jazz and operatic jazz. Some things, it's, because there's always a fine line. There's always a little bit of a middle ground where you can find something you like in almost anything. Overall, though, it was kind of an intentional, I think, one of these, sort of a cultural attack of some kind. But this guy, he was quoting me as to why jazz was great. Everything he said was just the exact sort of boilerplate, rhetoric you would get from any contemporary outlet or book on the subject. It was just word for word, sort of excusing it as fiery, rebellious newness. This is what they like. This is the concept they can't get over. So they don't really have. What they're missing is the idea that while you do need newness and change, you need to retain that link to your tribal tradition. And if you try to insert something totally opposed to that, then you're going along a destructive route. But they don't. They don't.
I would begin with the premise. I would begin with the premise of asserting that they are tolerating superficial destructive trash, but only if you can back that up with pointing to it and it being obvious to the layman that it is superficial destructive trash. So jazz is a very different story compared to the CIA normalizing and funding nihilistic and criminality virtuification of rap, for example, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said to him. That's what I said. That was my example. I was like, that was my example. He was like, you can't just, because he said something along the lines, you can't just claim a whole genre of music. Beloved is, an attack and trash. And I brought, at the time, I do remember bringing up rap. And I believe I said the jazz was sort of at first attempt at kind of something similar to rap, but maybe it was a bit more. It's hard to argue on jazz. It is a bit more excusable. There's virtuosity and there's a certain cleverness to it and all the rest of it. But in a way, it was one of the early kind of foreign injections of kind of a moderny sort of sweeping pop movement that was sort of cynical in certain ways, for sure, even though it's not nearly as trashy as something like rap or what we have now. But sorry, yeah, go on. Or
the ability of the audience to discern these things is of paramount importance. There's another thing that stops them from discerning what is trash and asserting that it is trash, and that is a cult of weakness veneration that runs parallel to a general sentimentalism that psychopathologizes aristocratic virtues, right? So you wrote in the book in a different chapter, I believe, that anything that is of a higher standard is immediately attacked and denigrated, one for many reasons, but one primary reason is because what is trash cannot stand beside what is good and retain its standard of being perceived as not being trash, right? So if you put what is trash next to what is good, people will notice that this is trash and this is good, and you can't have that, so you have to psychopathologize aristocratic virtues and the mythopoetic world soul of a peoples that is objectively superior compared to the mythopoetic world soul of modernism - mercantile industrialization that is being peddled and has been peddled through the institutions for a great many decades. This can be tangentially related to the Gramscian long march through the institutions. Greenbergian ethics and understandings of art and its subjectivity of values and worth only works in the segmented and bordered and highly cut off from criticism body of work and the proxies that defend that body of work. So we must have discernment for who the defenders of the mercantile industrialization body of work are, what their goals are, what their mentality is, via simply discerning them, right? And allowing the audience and the citizenry to merely compare what is trash and what is good. So long as the option is provided, so long as one side has a platform to assert and to discern what is good and what is bad and to point it out, even if it is suppressed, it will catch on. There are studies that say so long as 10% of the population believe XYZ extremely strongly, it will no doubt spread and manifest across the rest of the population. This can be applied to the discernment of trash and what is good, right? So long as at least 10% of the population are extremely assertive, fortified, know what they're talking about, yada, yada, it will spread eventually to the rest of the population. So I am quite optimistic when it comes to, despite the degrees of suppression, that the general population over time will acquire and assert discernment of trash standards versus good standards, right? After a parallel economy has been asserted in the arts, aesthetics, etc., gatekeeping will be paramount, because you will have subversive agents trying to diminish the worth, value, quintessence of what is good and try to assert that what is bad is good, right? So after the parallel economy of the arts and culture has been formed, it already exists and it already has been formed, by the way, it's just suppressed. So when at least 10% of the population are quite assertive in the discernment of modernist gimmickry and sophistry being trash, that is when they will begin to get very, very retarded, and they will eventually be
More than they are.
They already are, yes, but it can and will get worse, right?
Yeah,
So you
of course. Yeah.
that as the standards of cultural degeneration proceed, they will become more obvious, more stupid, more gimmickry, more gimmick-like, pardon, and it will become easier for us to assert and point it out and discern it, right?
Yeah.
So degree of consolation and hope on that note, yes,
Well,
a light
yeah.
at the end of the tunnel when it comes to their standards becoming so low, so depraved, so retarded that they will not that the general population, the general layman, no matter how emotionally and cognitively detached they are from the world of culture, art, aesthetics, etc., they will notice the degradation of standards because they have hit so low, right? I
Well,
have hope
maybe.
and optimism in that.
Well, I had more hope, say, when I first did the book, and I was like, say, my account was growing fast on Twitter and other places, Facebook. I still have the very same accounts then as now as I did then, but I grew a bit bored of just talking about art all the time, so I don't even do it that much anymore, except for these moments like this. But there's still, I got very stifled. We went through the whole censorship period of 2017. To this day, I'm still very censored. My accounts don't really grow like they should. So, I see there's a lot of my imitators sort of grow well, but they just don't have the right message. They take the basics of what I say, sort of sloppy, complaining about modernism, and then just post pictures of the churches and cathedrals all day with little sort of sappy messages.
That's quite all right,
And
sir. You don't need to have digits in order to be a trend setter. Yes.
I know, but you're talking about influencing people and like getting it out there. Like I'm very suppressed, and my message doesn't get that far. And you're saying, if we didn't have the censorship crackdown that we did, I'm sure we would be closer to having the kind of influence you're hoping for, or thinking about. I don't know how long they can keep things a lid on things the way they are. But like I said, even in our own community, there's be a lot of dissent as to how we go about it, what it means, what's going on. So I'd like to add that I don't say,
You
like
should
when I say
consider it
something.
a badge of honor, by the way, to be suppressed. It means that they consider you
I know, yeah.
dangerous and a potential trend setter. Trend
I know they
setters
do.
are far more dangerous compared to an opinionated nobody repeating and rehashing known talking points instead of a conceptualizer that then turns his conceptions that are new and fresh into a trend setting, right? So the
Yeah.
trend setting of discernment and open revilement of what is trash, right, is
Uh-huh.
one that can happen over time so long as you have trendsetters and foot leaders doing their duty, right?
Yes.
So long as the people that are meant to do their duty, that's the best that you can do,
No,
right?
that's all we can do. Yeah, that is all we can do. But I wanted to say a couple things there. I wanted to add on. Say because I know I'm going to be attacked. People are going to say, "Oh, he hates jazz. All jazz is terrible." It's not really the point. It's like, say, as I added to the caveat that jazz isn't that great example. It is an example, I think, of an early sort of attack. But like, there's many jazz. I like certain jazz music. I like John Barry, Lalo Schifrin, these kind of opera, composing, film, jazz people. There's a lot of jazz. It influenced a lot of stuff I really love. And that is possible as well. There can be these movements can start, these even anti-cultural movements. I mean, jazz would have happened. Jazz wouldn't have been imposed in the same way that rap music was, where it was very sort of cynically music industry moguls saying, okay, there's a point I think around in the late '80s and the '90s. I think people in charge of the music industry, which were very suspect people indeed, figured out that they didn't have to go hunting for bands and finding new talent. They sort of just realized actually whatever they make and put out, people will become the next trendy thing, and it doesn't matter. They can just create whatever they want, whatever boy band, trash, rap music, rubbish thing will become, as long as they realize that most people just look for the big shiny box, the big sign in the sky, and they take their orders from that, and it doesn't matter what shit you tell them to imbibe, they'll do it. So that was their cynical trick, and the rest of us are left stranded, stranded without a paddle, basically, because the great majority of people will go along with it. So in terms of what I wanted to say about jazz music, I realize it's not all bad. It's not quite the same kind of thing, and that it had certain innovation and this and that, but it was probably, like I said, one thing eases into the next, and there's no clear, absolutely decisive line cut with a scalpel where one thing becomes the other in a timeline of, especially in history and movements and overall trends in this and that direction. But so I don't, when I do stand by what I say, but I wouldn't totally 100% equate jazz with rap music. My main point there was the guy I was arguing with, his talking points in defending jazz, as are most of these sort of Nietzschean guys who want to defend modern art. They just sort of repeat early 20th century modernist type quotes that you might have heard by guys like Walter Benjamin or some other quack, hack, idiot, liar. And so that's what I don't like about their approach. And also, one thing that they're so fervent about, that they think I don't agree with, which is foolish, is that we do need new and innovative art and culture and a new style. And we can't just go back and just be creating the exact, Gothic, Baroque cathedrals and just do that for eternity. We do have to have an innovating, ongoing, evolving style, but that will only come about in something like a proper, like hierarchical industrialization or the guild system, where the evolution is safeguarded by proper masters through a school that is responsible for that vocation. Yes. Are you there? What do you think of that?
Yes, I'm here, sir.
Okay.
We talked about this briefly earlier. Custodians of the arts and culture, basically, is paramount when it comes to them being the vanguard of parallel systems of arts, aesthetics, culture, etc. Right? So
Yes.
when it comes to the construction and conceptualization of parallel systems, you will have conceptualizers and constructors, but you must also have vanguards who are willing to assert in no uncertain terms, this is the origination of modernist mercantile industrialization, which is trash and by design, yada yada, and each to their role, which is optimized. So when it comes to the craft guild system, everyone specializes in their role, right? So you can have an intellectual vanguard that attacks what is trash and has elevated discernment, right? You can have a conceptualization and construction base, right? And these two together would make a splendid collaboration when it comes to being defenders of what is good versus opposing those who peddle trash, right? So it doesn't all have to be done by one person. The body of work of forming and asserting a parallel economy and system when it comes to the arts, culture, etc., it doesn't come down to one person. It comes down to many, but those many can be instructed accurately, competently, and correctly, and they can be directed, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because humans are a hierarchical species regardless, they will look towards people that have the greatest body of knowledge when it comes to trying to defend good Western standards of art, pre-modernist ones, yada yada, and those who will be conceptualizers and constructors, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't. The point of consolation when it comes to fighting modernist trash and mercantile industrialization is that hierarchical industrialization will have multiple in-groups that each and every one of them do and specialize in their thing. As with the craft guilds, each and every in-group will specialize and optimize in their own fields, right?
Right.
So, for example, I and mine run a channel on Telegram called Western Heritage. It has 7,000 something subscribers, and it does very good work. We find things that are aesthetically pleasant and good, and our peoples enjoy them, right?
Yep.
Even if people do a minute amount of effort and work and don't dedicate their lives to it because, living in the fast lane and all that, each and every person can do their duty, right? So it's not a case of, Atlas holds the world on his shoulders and everyone else is his subordinate, yada, yada, and he is the greatest, yada, yada. When it comes to craft guilds, they have their internal hierarchies that are solid, grounded in competence, right? So the competence for construction and conceptualization, the competence for vanguarding and defending what is good versus what is modernist trash, the competence to conduct an analysis of the body of work of your own peoples versus an analysis of the body of work of modernist trash, such as at the Tate Gallery, right? So each and every person can specialize and focus in their role and what they want to do when it comes to the construction and assertion of a parallel economy in the arts, aesthetics, and culture, right? So, the greatest point of consolation with this is that one person does not have to be the final decision maker of all Western art, yada, yada. There will be in-groups, and those in-groups will have hierarchies among them based on competence of standards, right? Competence of standards and discernment and contribution, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, so maybe what you're saying is, yes, and maybe I should be more forgiving towards the Nietzscheans and the ones that are really into this kind of thing. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should let them be their own subgroup and not be too
By the way,
worried about their
sir,
time.
Nietzsche posited an aristocratic world soul to be the primary virtue that ought guide Western man. The idea that Nietzscheans would tolerate lower standards in morality and ethics, etc., you would just turn around and say that they have adopted modernist subjugation, fear, and slave morality, and that they are not actual Nietzscheans, because Nietzsche promoted the aristocracy of the soul, which goes hand in hand with the maintenance of standards when it comes to the arts, the arts, aesthetics, and culture of a civilization. When the vanguard is depleted, then you are flooded and drown in trash, right? So I don't understand their position.
Neither do I. I don't either. I did understand it better. It's been a little while. It some kind of hinges on.
I've never come across a Nietzschean that posits that anything other than the aristocracy of the soul, which ought run parallel with the aristocracy in arts, culture, and aesthetics. I've never come across a Nietzschean that is not pro-aristocracy.
They simply equate that aristocracy with the sort of innovative rebelliousness of the early 20th century art movements like Futurism, which were sort of.
But they're not aristocrats; they're mercantiles.
Well, futurists were arguably is one of these ones that were in between, and you can't completely say they were sort of. They swallowed certain amounts of Greenbergian type worldview for sure, but they were also.
But that's not intellectual aristocracy or aristocracy of the soul.
I know, but this is. I believe that's what the sort of thing they latch onto.
Okay, so they don't have groundedness in their position. Okay, fair enough.
Well, they're not quite as discriminating as we would be. Let's say they don't seem to focus or care too much about the Greenbergian break in art from before and after, which is really a very obvious point. To me, it's such an obvious point of origin as to why our art is so rubbish. Is where Greenberg came along, picked up the likes of Kandinsky and made a hero of him. Then later Picasso.
Yes, rampant subjectivism.
It's a very that part of it at least is so cut and dry and clear. And I don't know why more people ignore it.
Yeah, subjectivist ethics in art versus aristocratic ethics and standards maintenance versus the abolition of standards, right?
But
So you go on.
let me just say, let's just finish. From what I can see of what they are and what they want to do, to be honest, for the most part, what they're performing, they're doing a kind of performance of, again, it's slightly sort of a slightly bourgeois class signaling thing, where they want to waffle and philosophize about art in a kind of quasi-modernist way because it allows you to use this grandiose poetic language, and they sort of want to argue the point a lot and sort of defend things and have unique takes and points of view. And it's sort of like an exercise. Again, it's a bit of a signaling exercise to me without being overly practical or overly concerned. Most of them are
either money motivated or in-group loyalty presentation, right? You posit why they do it.
Yeah, maybe. And most of them would not be like actual fine artists, or they would not be attempted to have been artists themselves or have any sort of stake in the game in that sense, which is my vantage and many others as well. But then there's many of them that are artists as well. So I don't know. I can't say. But like maybe your point is right that I should let them be. At least they're doing something mostly correct. At least wanting to recognize and talk about art and the state of it. And I shouldn't be so harsh on them because actually some of them are quite nice as well. So I mean.
Well, it depends. I don't think it's a matter of nice or not nice. You can openly assert that something is destructive trash by design. And if they do not agree that something is destructive trash by design, if it clearly is, obviously, then you get to call them trash enjoyers and trash tolerators, right?
Yeah, well, I could do that, but
so that's the winning point. That's where it ends, right? The whole diatribe ends with you tolerate and enjoy trash, therefore your standards are trash. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Right?
Yeah, well, so part of me believes this is slightly astroturf movement because there's so many of them all of a sudden, and there's one of these things that gets kind of, along with my suppression, comes these little little movements like this that are sort of almost saying the same message but with a slight caveat. And I don't know. I mean, that's me being paranoid or silly or having my ego being a little too large probably. But who knows? I mean, who knows? It seems fake when
there are many in-groups, by the way, not merely in America and England, that have the very exact similar discernment competencies and outlook when it comes to the reformation of a parallel economy of arts, culture, aesthetics. And we merely represent one branch, though a fairly big one, on the tree-body of work that is the parallel economy of arts, aesthetics, and culture, right?
Yeah.
So the greatest point of consolation is you don't have to do it all yourself. There are others who are equivalently competent at discernment and construction of what is good, while simultaneously acting as a vanguard that rebukes and defends their own in-group from what is modernist, predatory, destructive trash, right?
Yeah.
So long as there are bodies that are capable of discernment, rebuking, and construction, and so long as those thought leaders and trendsetters and conceptualizers possess sufficient testicular and spinal fortitude to assert what is right and good and to rebuke what is bad and destructive trash, we will make headway when it comes to the formation of hierarchical industrialization and parallel economies in the arts, aesthetic world and cultural world, right?
Well, let me just say what I think is going to happen. I can give you a prediction of exactly what I think will happen. You're right in that we have these little groups and our efforts, and they're all sort of somewhat atomized and they're splintered and everyone disagrees. But yet there's various groups doing their best, doing this and that. They will continue and they'll probably grow as much as they can. There might be certain breakthroughs, maybe if the censorship is somehow lifted, you relax slightly, and certainly in my own case, anyways, I could have a lot more following and influence. But that will continue, and each of those factions will perhaps, as they go, pick up speed and grow in their own way. Overall, though, I think there's two things I can say about this related to industrialization. this is also related to hierarchical industrial, or certainly in mercantile industrialization, is what Ted Kaczynski would talk about in terms of this is what I was alluding to with the supply chain itself being like an unstoppable system at this point, that it's its own beast that doesn't even, the human concerns are already by the wayside. It's like like if you know anything about Ted Kaczynski's ideas about technology, this is where I would disagree with him, where he thinks technology itself is inherently bad, nothing you can do but let it destroy itself, partially or wholly destroy us in the process. That just using it is enough to corrupt you and to destroy your civilization. I don't tend to agree. I hope he's not right, but according to him, it is like its own. It's like a dark god. It's like a beast. The technology. It obeys its own rules. It's inhuman in its morality, let's say, and all the furtherance of its use along the way will just increase its power until it somehow, even though it's like not sentient per se, it's just like a system. It will destroy us and like willfully put an end to us. And I believe that there is a certain truth to that. I do view technology as a dark god, and I think it's right and proper to think of it, and that's excellent and archaic thing for me to do. It just needs a name. I don't know what we should call it, but we should think of it as that. Maybe not technology, I should say, but certainly the certain current system of industrialization and the way it's being used should be thought of as such, and something you have to get tame and get a hold of and rehumanize under a yoke of proper human values, which would restrain it and put it to proper use, which would require a huge effort. And all the talks of winning over and battling and we're going to rise and do this and that, I don't think any of that much is going to happen. Like I said, our own little groups are going to continue and grow. What I think is going to happen is the system is going to, industrially speaking, people speak about, what do they call it? Talking about we're going to slip into another feudalism. These billionaires around the world are going to become basically more and more like actual feudal lords. And I think maybe that's somewhat true. Gradually, they sort of will. And that's not a bad thing per se, even though they may not be at present be the best examples. That may lead us through the back door back into a kind of hierarchy that hopefully isn't so mercantile. I don't know, but that seems to be the way things are leading, whether I like it or not, or what is going to happen. Whatever evolution, what route evolution takes, is beyond our control. We say we want to take control of things and guide culture back the way we want. We can have a certain influence. We can point out where things are wrong and bad, and hopefully have a positive influence overall. But as to what exactly for real will happen, I don't know that anybody trying to work or struggle as an artist today will have much influence over the world and the events in it as we speak, particularly more related to industrialization, the supply chain system, the efforts to get off the earth with rockets, and the general corruptness and sort of disability, failing decrepitude of the American empire as it's dying over the next decade or 100 years or however long it takes. And in the midst of this, a kind of billionaire.
I think that you can work with exclusion and gatekeeping, though, of
you can, yeah.
the degenerate. When it comes to the degenerating West by design in culture, arts, and aesthetics, the solution to this is merely vanguardism dash exclusion and gatekeeping, right? So if you have competent people who openly assert the exclusion, gatekeeping, safeguarding, and vanguarding of the craftsman guild in groups that all contribute to the body of hierarchical industrialization, you can work within those frames and parameters, right? So if everyone is on board and on the same page when it comes to good standards maintenance, revile, rebuke, and discard what is trash, venerate and make virtuous what is good, despite the differences within the in-group guilds of hierarchical industrialization, they can all basically be on the same page of modernist trash is destructive bullshit, everyone can start from basic foundational concepts, right? Such as modernist trash is destructive by design, and the sophistry and gimmickry utilized to venerate it is all trash and can be discerned to be trash easily by anyone who has sufficient discernment to do so, which doesn't take a lot, considering the lowering of standards has gotten so bad, even the normies can understand that the standards have been lowered so much, right? So vanguarding, gatekeeping, and the ability to notice subversive agents, and infighting, operatives tasked with infighting, creating infighting, pardon. There are means and ways and methods of doing what needs to be done, right? So long as everyone does their duty competently and is dedicated to the maintenance of high standards, right? So long as the in-groups have starting points, they can proceed regardless of how many obstacles are in their way.
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to do either way, and we'll see what happens, I guess. So I think we'll leave it there for this now. I have to go pretty quick here. One thing I'd like to do maybe in the next one, or we should do one on, is the actual state of pop culture, like as we speak, how miserably bad it is, and actually how that relates to the censorship crackdown, which sort of happened sort of
narrative conditioning and control. Yes.
Yeah, I know. Like I remember before 2017, you could go to YouTube and you could see a video. It would lead you naturally to information of any kind. Anything was there. Everything was there. Anything you wanted. And now everyone is invariably guided, either immediately or eventually, to sort of this urbanite twerky music trash, or like young children doing opening presents for an hour, or this mindless sort of sensational trash of the highest order in every possible way, which really, I believe, has a serious, not just a dumbing down effect, but it has really made people quite crazy over the last, how long has it been since 2017? Jesus, we're almost getting like it's well over, it's going to be a decade at some point soon, for God's sake.
The point is that they love being conditioned to be slave trash and have loyalty to an in-group of making a virtue out of low standards, right? So if you can get away with having low standards, and it's actually a virtue, then you just continue on the path to low standards and things get worse by design.
Yes.
Which is, in its end game version, probably a good thing for us, because we can go through a history of trash standards and teach it to whoever comes after us, and safeguard, gatekeep, and vanguard against it, right? Anyway,
well,
yes, you are correct that we've gone on for quite a while, and we do want to keep it short so that people are compelled to listen to it intently and don't get bogged down in the mire of ceaseless diatribes and repetitions, right? I agree.
Right, okay. Yeah, so we'll put an end to it there, and then I'll put it up, I don't know when, soon.
Very good, sir. I'll make sure that it's shared across my platforms as well. Righto, toodaloo, sir. Be well.
Yeah, we'll do another one soon. Okay, bye-bye. Bye.